for this day. We ask that the food that you have assigned for this time be nourishment for our body. We thank you for the hands that prepared it. We thank you for the hands that delivered it. And God, we pray as we prepare to partake, God, would you be a calorie burner? And we thank you, Lord, for who you are. We pray, we say amen.
Amen. Amen. We'd like for everybody to come help themselves to lunch. We're going to take the next 30 to 45 minutes just to fellowship, eat, and then we'll launch into our little program and the video that will be taken. And each person will do their thing, have 3 minutes to do it. And I want to thank you all for coming today. But I also want to give a special thanks to my ride or die girls. I want to thank Devorah, Val, and Katrina. Because without them, we wouldn't be putting this on today. And I want to thank them for the last 9 months of all of their help and energy in making today possible. So thank you very much. All right. Don't hesitate, jump on in line. Time to be part of it. Thank you very much for participating today. You don't have to.
Can you all hear me? Thank you again for this opportunity to talk about the history that is St. James African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, the oldest church in Ithaca, as well as the oldest AME Zion church in the world, still operating out of its original foundation. So there are other AME Zion churches that are older than us, but we are the only one that is still operating out of its original foundation. Where can I begin? I feel like once I got here about 4 years ago, I was inundated with so much history and introduction. You have to know the Joneses, and you have to know the nuns, and you have to know the Welches, some of the pivotal people in our community. But paramountly, after looking at the video, what it really helped me to embolden is the importance of community and how Southside story is the church's story. The church's story is Southside story, because historically St. James pastors have also been the executive directors of Southside Community Center as well. So we're definitely linked in that way. There's an African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. But if you push the envelope just a little bit longer, the question is, did the village get the memo? Right. And because if the village hasn't gotten the memo, then what happens is that the children begin to have disdain for the community and then burn down the village. So in this moment, as I stand before you as a young preacher, as a young pastor of this iconic church, this iconic congregation, the video has instilled in me why it's necessary to do the work now. So that we can come back 20, 30 years from now and see that they're still holding the mantle and the importance of Ithaca beyond. So with that, again, you all are in the Mecca of, as we say, Black Greekdom. No matter if you are a Delta, a Sigma, a Q, this is home, because in the room that we sit in today is the very room that the founders of Alpha Phi Alpha had the conversation to establish the fraternity. So when people come here from all over the walks of the MPHC, I tell them, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. And that also puts paramountly the importance of Ithaca. We always assume that when we talk about New York, we think of New York City, right? But there is so much rich history and value with upper parts of New York that is so profound. So again, as a pastor of this church and having the opportunity to interim pastor for the family of Harriet Tubman before I got here, I'm truly humbled to see that this exists, and I pray that God takes this to the next level and let people know that Ithaca ain't going nowhere. Amen. Because it's here to stay. Y'all, thank y'all so much. Thank you.
Next we have Miss Mabel Welch coming up to grace us.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
As usual, I say whatever I have to say with music. And coming here at the age of 10, we were a family of nearly 12. Lived on South Plain Street for a good deal of that time, in a house that is no longer there, but still the spirit of it, and the spirit of home is still Ithaca to me. And I've raised 6 children here. Started worshiping in this church when we came here, and Reverend Bonner used to come around. You hear that bell ringing, and then he would come around that corner in his robe, sleeves furling, and come right to our house and say, "Children, come to church." So the indictment upon the generation that was before us is really, I feel that we may have been present, but we were not educated. I feel that lack of education, being surrounded by history and all kinds of opportunity, but no one imparting that knowledge. And here I am at the ripe old age of, well, I'll tell you, 72, and still learning, still hearing, and sometimes it causes me to weep. But I continually recite some names of people that were here in this church and in this community that I still learn great lessons from. So I want to talk to you about Hazel T. Love and Leo Love and Mary Love. And I want to talk to you about Lillian Love. And I want to talk to you about, let's see, Herbert Freeman. I don't even know if people even remember him. The old man Pete and Miss Edna, they used to walk up and down the street. And Miss Ruth, y'all remember them? So, me and Lulu would be running from them. Especially Miss Edna, because, you know, she had that Budweiser bottle in her. And we were like, oh God, she's coming to our house. And we were like, Mom, here she comes. But there were so many, I remember, Art. And of course we know Billy Bibby, who was my mother's husband and Stephanie's father. And she's laughing over there. But all of these people formed who I am, what I was exposed to, lessons I learned, what not to do. I learned about hypocrisy, not setting the example, not teaching children. So I tried to teach mine which way to go. And we lived at Southside. I still feel cold chicken grease under my nails and in my hands from doing the chicken dinner to support the center. And, you know, when money got misappropriated a couple times because, you know, we were like trying to plug up the hole over here and trying to plug up the hole over there. And next thing you know, we had a mess. But it was a wonderful thing to get together and put our shoulders to the wheel and get the work done that needed to be done. And the center is still a great place. When I came here, you could go in that little rec room and you could dance. You know, they had record players then with vinyl records and just on the stack. And Ben Dean and Mr. Townsend would be in charge of that. And you better not step out of line. We played ping pong. We had cooking lessons in that kitchen. And then out in what is now like the lobby area, there was a big fireplace. And then we used to have dances out there. And y'all know, if you remember the Christie brothers, Fred and Greg. Remember Teddy and Greg Christie? Y'all remember them? Okay, so there's all kinds of people around. Remember Mike Dickerson, let's call his name, Celeste, Susie, Evelyn. These are all people that are in our community, and now we can only sometimes speak to some of them spiritually because they're not physically present. So not only do we have the responsibility to pass on history, we have to pass on that whole total sense of community to each other. Keep it alive. Keep memories alive. The good with the bad. Keep them alive. But for me, the center of it has been to recognize and work in my area of ministry, and that is to get people to live for the Lord Jesus Christ. And we don't talk about that. They didn't teach us that. They were teaching us the 10 Commandments, but they wasn't living them. And it's time for me to go sit down. Wonderful. And so now we're going to talk about another rich history right down the street.
the Southside Community Center, of which just about each and every one of us have 10,000 memories that we can think about that were part of that center when we were growing up, how pivotal it was in our lives. So today we're going to talk about it today with Dr. Nia.
Yes.
And she's going to let us know what's going on today, and the floor is yours, my dear.
All right. Thank you all so much. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Nia Nunn, and I took some notes because I know you said 3 to 4 minutes, and this is one of my favorite stories to tell. Such a favorite story that I'm actually working on a book associated with my history in Ithaca and the roots of Southside Community Center. So it's called The Community is My Classroom, a curriculum of radical vulnerability. And I won't sit here and read it all, but I did take a few notes just to provide my story as it relates to teaching the history of this space and what we're doing now. So again, I'm known on this block and here in this community as Dr. Nia. Once upon a time, I was Miss Nia as a school psychologist at Beverly J. Martin. But I teach at Ithaca College, so I have the glorious responsibility of preparing teachers in large part for Ithaca. It's my true joy, and Southside serves as a living laboratory. Creative curriculum where I have young people coming down, connecting with our children and making that happen. We also run a performing arts program out of Southside every year. And so that's a 2-minute video that may be a nice special thing to share with folks at some point. And so I was born in 1981. I won't give all of the details, but I will say that my parents were Ithaca College students. Said they wouldn't stay and be townies, but that lo and behold, that's exactly what they did, and raised my brothers and I here, and I'm so grateful for that. My father is actually Finan, who was opening the video that we just watched and played music as well. So performing arts has always been a hook as it relates to serving, teaching, and nurturing the community. That is the heartbeat of Southside. There's so many folks in this video. Diane Sams, Mama Scott, who's actually, I have a whole chapter highlighting her. So it's always exciting to see that we have these resources that continue to teach. I feel like growing up in the 80s and 90s here in Ithaca, as a 4-year-old, I was at Southside for Girl Scouts. It was a predominantly black Girl Scout troop. Several of our mothers, the Martha Smiths, my mother Shelley Nunn, Marcia Fort, there are a bunch of us as little black girls all over Ithaca in predominantly white spaces. So our mothers took the initiative to gather us on a regular basis. It was an experience. I remember I was too young to participate, but my mother insisted, right, and contributed a whole bunch to make it happen. We went camping, we explored, we learned about our skin, our bodies. It was normalizing black girlhood at a very young age. In fact, we were raised to be leaders. So I told you I was 4, right? And now I serve as the board president, but the executive director is Miss Siobhan Bunch, who you'll see little Girl Scout photos of us. I'm 4, she's 5. And so we represent the leadership legacy that we're teaching and trying to embark upon our young people right now. I feel like we were also the wave of black educators in Ithaca. I think it was Beverly J. Martin, right? I went to Central Elementary School. I think I heard some people shout out Central. And it was my 5th grade year that the name was changed from Central Elementary to Beverly J. Martin. Beverly J. Martin was gold to us, right? I mean, Royal, as the first black administrator, her family's history goes back 100 years on this block. She is the science center. She had so many black people falling in love with not only teaching, but science and loving themselves. And she mentored black teachers. So I'm the product of all of the black teachers that she either encouraged to stay in Ithaca, to get off the hill, Ithaca College and Cornell, to come into the community, including my father, Fee Nunn, Denise Lee, Millie Clark Maynard, and those who have passed, Abraham Lee. You know, these are all of our teachers. Todd Peterson, right? These are the folks that encouraged us to be great when we were very little people. And so it's a joy to always be able to speak their names. I left Ithaca for 8 years for undergrad and for grad school, and then came back home as I mentioned, as a school psychologist at Beverly J. Martin. And then ran programming with my father out of Southside, right? So COMEP is celebrating its 21st anniversary this summer. But the roots are strong right there. Once upon a time, I was the executive director at Southside, interim, while we were figuring things out, right? And working to maintain our independence. So when you hear Mama Scott talking, that's what she was shouting out to us when we were young, and especially in high school. She said, you have the responsibility to protect this space, and for it to maintain its independence. So those of you who've been around, you may see me dealing with Common Council and not just me on my own, we as a collective, even our children coming to Common Council meetings to argue for the protection and the continued support of Southside Community Center. So it has served its purpose now. We're talking 90 years, but we are still, in many cases, fighting to protect our mission and our identity as Black people in Ithaca. So I'm super excited for the invitation to highlight some of the joys, some of the beauty that exists in our community. And just to continue this leadership legacy is a part of my purpose and a team of incredible Black educators that I get to serve with. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So next, we're going to have a little history lesson about a lot of the Black businesses that were here in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They're long gone, but they were the businesses that flourished during the time that we were growing up. And I am going to ask Ms. Valerie Grinston to come up and take us down memory lane of a lot of those Black businesses. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to sit. Okay, I had the privilege to look up some information on some of the Black businesses here in Ithaca at the time that when I was around and lived on South Plain Street. And so some of the business that they had here was Sister Tucker's Catering, where she catered in her own home. We had Katie Briggs also, who was a caterer, who catered from her home. And there was B and Bobby's Bar, Jim Miller's Bar. We have the Elks Forge City Lounge, and also the barbershop that Joe Hopkins and Clarence Welch had been cutting hair. And also Eleanor Hutchison was a hairdresser, and Claudia Jenkins, who was a CJ Sew and Sew. So also, the three people that I have down that spurred my mind was Adolf Hellstorp, Mr. Laundryman, over on Court Street. We used to pass by there a lot. But he was born in 1915 in Baltimore, Maryland. Mr. Hellstorp served in the United States Army prior to World War II and was discharged with honor in 1938. His laundromat was located on Corn Street. That's up and around the corner. Let's see, he was the first African Americans to own businesses in Ithaca. He was employed as a cook in the fraternity at Cornell University for 32 years. Upon his retiring, it was noted that from 1960 to 1992, he mentored hundreds of young men, impressively remembered their names, hometowns, and girlfriends years after he graduated. And another business was the Fishburns that was located on Seneca Street. And the Fishburns opened in 1978, and it was Harold and Emma Fishburne were the owners. Mel Bell was the manager and the bartender because he was well known in the community and a native to Ithaca. And he was also a high school basketball star. And Harold Fishburne purchased the business from another Black business owner by Jim Miller. This is establishment shared businesses of the community along with the Elks, Julio's, Reno's, and the Bill Bryant, just to name a few. The students from Cornell University initially came to Fishburne's for an art show and continued to come thereafter. Julian Bonds was visited after an event at Cornell, and the bar approved of the women's softball team, which won the championship and the Fishburns closed around 1985. And then we also have Dr. Alex Galvin, MD. He was the first and only black physician in Tompkins County. And this is one of the doctors that we went to as kids. So also, last but not least, Beverly J. Martin. I had the privilege to work in the school and to work with the children, and was proud to be there as a Beverly J. Martin person that knew and took the privilege of living down the street from her on 2nd Street. So that was a very good privilege for me. But she was the first principal of elementary school in Ithaca, began appointed in 1968. She was a native of Ithaca, New York, an educator, a community leader, inspiration to anyone who knew her. In 1940, she attended Central Elementary School and graduated from Ithaca High School in 1953. She was class president. She received her college education at Cornell University, employed in the Ithaca City School District as a teacher and administrator. Ms. Martin taught 5th grade at Central School for 6 years. Her classroom offered a home for a science activity program, which was inspiration for what would become the Science Center. Central School was renamed Beverly J. Martin in 1991 in her honor. Ms. Martin was said to be a very lively person with great sense of humor. Her warmth and presence led the children to call her Mama Bear. Well known for recruiting and mentoring many of Ithaca's great leaders, and Beverly J. Martin legacy lives on. And there was also another name, Marjorie Penelope. She was the principal, and she was administrator for Ithaca School District when she was a member of this church. So that's some of the black businesses back then in the 1960s, 50s, 1960s, 70s, and 80s. There you go. Very good, John.
Good job.
Thank you.
I'm impressed.
We shall not forget. They will remain in our hearts and also in the history of Ithaca. We shall not forget them. And so next, I would like to have Ms. Deborah come up. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the local homes registered as part of the Underground Railroad and the significance of the large front porches. Ms. Deborah Johnson.
It's going to be very quick. Very quick, under 3 minutes. Hi, my name is Deborah Johnson. I grew up in this amazing neighborhood of Ithaca, New York on the south side at 532 West Clinton Street. We had a gas station next door, and I took a picture. The gas was $1.24 at the time. You'll never see that again. But this neighborhood, it was just really, really amazing to us. And the friends, they were family. I mean, like she said, if you messed up in the neighborhood, you got in trouble in front of the person's house that you messed up with, and then they called your parents. By the time you got home, that was another circuit that you had to deal with. But through the Southside Community Center and this church, this was central to us. We went from school, elementary schools, straight to the Southside. We went from schools straight to Amy Zion Church. We had jewelry making at the Southside. We had a connection with Cornell because students used to come down and they would work with us. They would teach us jewelry making. They would teach us several different things. You talked about the dances going on. We had amazing mentors in the neighborhood. Your father was amazing. He was just amazing. There's 2 other people we didn't mention, and that's Lily and Raymond. They were central to us. They really, really watched out for us, and they made sure we didn't get in trouble. If we got in trouble and they were around, they would straighten you out and send you home. They didn't play, but I was reading in some of the history in Ithaca, and what Michelle was talking about, something that struck me, and I never, it saddens me that we did not know we lived in the midst of so much history. We were never ever told these stories. Right. We didn't know about Frederick Douglass, and Harriet Tubman is part of my family, but I don't know to what extent. I have a cousin that knows history like crazy. His name is Leo. He lives in South Carolina now, and he'll tell you everything about him. But it saddens me that we didn't know that we had so much rich history right in the places that we lived. And I sent out an email about the properties, the Hager's house on Green Street, the Jenkins house on Green Street, all the houses on Cleveland Avenue, and I never realized this until I read that article. They have large porches. There's a significance of those porches. They used those as, they were barbers. And they brought the slaves on, and this was a main transfer point for the slaves headed to Canada. But the porches served not only to cut their hair, but to change their appearance. So they didn't, and I, for lack of a better term, look like slaves, you know, when they left here. They provided clothing, they provided food for them, some of them provided housing for them. So if you look up and down these streets, most of these houses have large porches, and I never even thought about it until I read this article. And I was like, wow, that's something different that we never even heard about. So we just had such a great growing up in this neighborhood. All watched out for each other. I was a member of the basketball teams you were going to. We used to get killed by all because we were all little. You know, we had practice at the South Side, and we traveled to Albany, we traveled to Syracuse, we traveled to Elmira, we traveled to Rochester. Rochester was rough. We were walking through the streets as, is it Biggie? No, what's his name? Slater. Thank you. We were walking through the streets of of Rochester, going to a basketball game. We had to find a place to eat. So the group of us, because they said don't go out alone, so we all walked together. And this crowd was coming at us, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get in trouble. We shouldn't be out here by ourselves. Who showed up in the front of the crowd? Slater. And Slater grew up in Ithaca. I don't know if he grew up in Ithaca, but he was always here. 6'5", you didn't mess with him. So we were safe when we saw, I mean, there were people throwing stuff out the windows at us because we weren't from there. But the trips really, it got us to know the areas around Ithaca. And that was all started from the South Side. You know, the area in the gym, I don't know if you remember, used to be open. It was an open balcony so that you could look down on the basketball games. The parties they used to have at the South Side, the celebrations. As kids, when we couldn't go to the parties, we stayed at the side door, and we were so, like, we wanted to get in there. We thought there was so much going on, and then by the time you got into the party, it was like, this is it. This is all we had to go through. But it was just a really great central part. This silly article that we heard that a kid was born with a cross on his head, so the world was ending. We left Henry St. John's and came straight to the church. Prayed on the church steps, and they laugh at me when I remind them of that, but that was central. That's something I remember about growing up here. But I'm telling you, but we couldn't get into church, so we sat on the steps. We were like, we prayed on the steps, we'd still be blessed. The world didn't end, so we were all right. But these places were just so really important to us. But take a look down the block and know that those porches aren't just there as porches for people to socialize on. They had a purpose at that time. And I thought that was something that really stood out to me in reading these articles. So, thank you very much. I know I said I didn't have much to say. But that's what happens when you grow up around greatness. And look at all of us. You know, we got to pass this on because it doesn't need to be another
22 years.
Yeah, another 20 years before we get together, or the people that grow up in this neighborhood know what they're growing up around. Our paragraph in history in high school was one paragraph. And I said, that's all we did. They said, oh, you're being disrupted, be quiet.
Right.
Yeah. They didn't want us to know this.
That's right. They didn't want us to know this.
Thank you for sharing. Each one reach one, each one teach one, and that is exactly what we're doing. May this continue on. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to have individuals add in their experiences growing up here so that we can add that to the list. And I'd like to start with Mr. Dodo Milton.
Hello, everybody. Hello. My name is Douglas Milton. That dodo thing should be.
Always be dodo.
this is my great grandfather. And he and his brother, they were slaves in Virginia, and I guess they seen there was a guy who was doing something. I can't remember what the instrument that he was using in the fields and stuff. And the slave master guy said, you know, if you break this, he broke this thing, and he said, if you break it again, I'm gonna shoot you. So my grandfather and his brother, they seen this. And so they were like light skinned, so you know they worked in a house, so they weren't in the fields. But they seen this guy get killed, right? And they said, we should leave. So they escaped from Virginia, went to Canada, and my great-grandfather married a Mohawk Indian, and they had 17 children. So we are a part of that, like Lulu and Devora, and so we are a part of that. So my great-great-grandmother and Lulu's great-grandmother, and we're all a part of that 17 people. But we only found information about 13 of them. So there's some missing. But that is kind of like my history and stuff, and so this is on my mom's side. Now, there's the Milton side too, and my grandmother, Agnes, who was instrumental in the church over here at Calvary, and actually, my grandparents lived next door at 505, and there was a house in the back, 505 and a half. I was born in that house. So the story is that my mom and Dad was getting ready to go, this is my joke, but I think it might be sort of true, but they were getting ready to go to the movies and see, what's the guy's name? I can't think of the guy's name. Who's the cowboy, white cowboy, famous cowboy? John Wayne. And so my name was going to be John. But anyway, so the story is that my mom water broke. I slid out on the floor, and I hit my head on the dresser. And there was some people there who helped my mom, you know, because my dad, I heard, was like drinking wine, and it was like, Dad, name was like Bassel. My father's name is Bassel, right? He said, Bassel, go pick him up, pick him up. He's like, no. And I think Mel Bell was there too. You're right. And so, but anyway, the ladies who were there that I remember was Miss Bibby, your grandmother, I think.
Well, that's definitely Bibby.
Yeah. I should not forget her name.
Jamie Box.
No. But anyway, Miss Bibby was there. Lucy Brown was there. And I can't think of another lady was there, so my name was sliding along for a long time. Don't ever call me that. Don't ever call me that. So they knew, and they were instrumental in my being alive, you know. And back then, I remember my mom going to the hospital, and they said, well, you can't come in here. They had to do something because you had a dirty birth. They told my mom I was a dirty birth. You should have seen my mom was pissed off. You know? But besides that, you know, my history's like a long time. My mom, like I said, pre-Civil War. On my dad's side, I think my grandparents' parents were here in like the 1800s. Wow. So that is kind of like my history and stuff. So I'm kind of from the dirt, you know what I mean? Anyway.
So next we're going to have Miss Lulu Carrington come to the floor and grace us with her presence and her story.
What story?
Would you like to chair?
Hello, everybody. Everybody knows me as Lulu. And I just wanted to, I was saying, I was listening to everybody. Actually, it seemed like to me that everybody covered the Dodo finished it up. But, I was just thinking, like, when they were talking about the history about the clubs and stuff, and I was telling Ann, I said, well, they forgot B's bar. It was Miller's over here and B's over here. And that was back in the day, way back, because, everybody would go over to Jim Miller's, they leave there and go over to B's, And my mother, of course, she worked at it. And, she was working there, she leave there and go work at Southside. How you go from a bar to taking care of children? But, I was just thinking about all the days that, they used to have pictures at Southside. They would go up the stairs, and my mother and the band? What do you call the band they had? the drum and bugle corps. They had, and they all were there. And the drum and bugle, my mother and Aunt Till, it was a bunch of them. I was looking at the pictures, I'm like, wow. And Aunt Betty and my mother, they worked at Southside in their daycare. And so, you know, it was just like back in the day, Southside, like you say, these days, I always tell my grandkids, I said, you know, we used to make our happiness, because they always talk about how boring Ithaca is. And I said, we used to make our happiness. We go to Southside and Vendine and Mr. Thomas, they look at us like, you know, well, what you looking at me for? You know, well, they be looking at us, we looking at them. And they said, well, what you guys gonna do today? And you know, they would make us, we would have like the dances they were talking about. They would make us, but we used to have block parties too. And Southside, they would block off Cleveland Avenue, Clinton Street and Green Street, and we would have the whole area. You know, so it was, you know, it was just a lot different than today's day. And like they say, it take a village to raise a child. Back in them days, you know, you could go to anybody. Before you got home, like they said, your parents knew what was going on. You done got a beating at home, you done got a beating at this person's house, and you know, and then you were ready to go to bed. You know, but I just think all back during the days, but these days, you go and tell these children's parents something they done did, trying to, you know, help get them out of trouble or something. Them people allowed to curse you out or even want to fight. You know, so you don't just do that these days like we could back in them days. You know, it was just so much different then. But like you say, the South Side, you know, and Aunt Helen's house down there, that's been there forever. You know, I don't think nobody's ever done nothing to that Helen down there, Brown Jones, Helen Jones, and nobody did nothing. That house still standing though. I don't know how, but it is. But you know, it was just so much difference, that things that have happened back in them days to today's day, you know, but it is what it is,
And now I would like to ask Ms. Ann Carter to come to the floor and share her pearls of wisdom.
Hi, my name is Annie Carter, and I was not raised or born in Ithaca, but I came to Ithaca in 1963 looking for a job. So I came here on a Sunday and I got a job on Tuesday. So I have been in Ithaca ever since. But what I do remember about Ithaca, when I came to Ithaca, my mother brought me to Ithaca and introduced me to Mrs. Jones, Miss Alberta Mitchell, Miss, that live on Cleveland Avenue, Smitty, and that was one other lady.
Miss
Jane,
Maureen?
no, Jane Baltz, I think it was.
Jamie Baltz?
Now, these was the women she introduced me to, and she told me, if you ever have a problem or an issue, this is where you should go. And those was my mentors for me when I came to Ithaca. And then later on, I was introduced to, he was a contractor, stayed on Center Street.
Mrs. Sands? Jack Sands?
No, it stayed on Center Street.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes, Mr. Rollins. I met Mr. Rollins, and he came to me and said, I want to introduce you to a couple of places. So he introduced me to Jim Miller's and B. And he said, this is these two places you can come. And if you act like a lady, you're going to be treated as one and they will protect you. And then they sent me to the Elks, which is Forest City Lodge 180 at 536 West Green Street. And I was introduced to members there, and later on I was recruited as a member. And I have been a member there since 1973. And we are one of the oldest black organizations here in Ithaca. And now we are struggling because since COVID, we have not been able to get our footing. But we are still surviving, and we ask for support when we have things. And that is a place you can come to. We don't have a lot of individuals, because there are rules that you have to follow. You cannot come there with your pants hanging down. You cannot come in there wearing hats. You cannot at the bar, and you cannot be disrespectful. And because the young generation now have so many other places that they can go to and they can do these things, it is very, very, very hard for us to get new members. But we are not going to lower our standards as a nonprofit organization that's been around since 1919. We just celebrated 119 and 111 years on May the 4th. When our guest speaker was Senator Lee Weld, she was our guest speaker. That was the highlight of our night. But I love Ithaca because of the falls, and I met some wonderful individuals here. And I'm so glad I was asked to come here. I'm not a born Ithacan, but I've been here quite a while. Thank you.
And next, I would like to ask Katrina to come up and share her experience.
Miss Katrina.
Yes. So I'm Katrina Ward, and I moved to Ithaca, I'm going to say April 1968. My parents got a divorce. My dad stayed in Florida. My mom moved to Ithaca. And I was here for 9 years. So that meant when I was growing up, I spent my 4th grade year all the way up through high school and first year of college. And the people that was most important to me, I think that helped to shape me, were Beverly Martin, and I had a wonderful high school counselor, Stephanie Orduna. And they were just really strong women, and they did a lot of encouraging when I was in school. So they helped me to become who I am today. But the Southside Community Center was a place that I remember going to as a child all the way through high school. And going to the center, meeting my friends there, there were 5 of us who really hung tight. But as a community, I think everybody knew everybody. But the Southside Community Center really instilled skills that set you up for a lifetime of success. I learned how to be collaborative. I learned how to be respectful. I learned how to cooperate with everybody that came into the door. And it was a place where a lot of my firsts happened. My first dance, my first kiss. So it was just a wonderful place to go. I lived on the north side, on North Plain Street. And once I dropped those books off, we'd be like, okay, we're gonna meet at the south side at what time? And we were all there. And I haven't been back to Ithaca in 50 years. But what I will say, coming back home and just looking all around, it really, really just, it's like I never left. It doesn't look the same, but it feels the same. So Southside community has been a really powerful important part of my life. Both as I went through my career, I'm a retired educator, and I wanted to be a counselor so I could help kids like Miss Orduna, because no matter what, if I was not doing well in the subject, she always got me a counselor, a tutor, and it was always a really cute guy from Cornell or college. So it was like she got me. And so one of the things that I wish I could have done, because she always said, you know, you could be a really better student, and I never really believed that. But I wish I would have had the opportunity to just thank her, because she made me want to be a counselor, and I became a counselor. And so there was a lot of things when I think about Miss Martin. She was a school principal, and I ended up being a school district level administrator. So they just made a really big impact on my life. And my friends who I still have here, golly, I just, lifetime friends. And so I am so happy to be here and see all of you guys. So thank you. Thank you.
And now, the next person I'm going to ask to come up is my little big sister. Miss Carolyn Watkins. Archer Carolyn Watkins.
Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Archer Carolyn Watkins, the younger sister of Rochelle. And then we have her cohorts and partners in crime. I'm also their younger sister. they let me hang with them a little bit when I was younger, when I was ready to go. So I was born here, and I was raised here until I was about 13, and we moved away. And the thing I love about coming back is people always say, you look just like your mom. You look just like, oh, you look like your mom. So I hear that 15 times when I come back. The old familiar faces and the welcome that you get, because I've lived all over, and you can always come back here. People knew your parents, and they embrace you the same way they did as you left. It's as if you had only been gone, you know, for a few years. I've been gone close to 50 years now. Believe it or not, when I think about that, it blows my mind. So now reside in Philadelphia and have for the last 25 years. But I still keep in touch. Devorah, Val. As far as influential people here in Ithaca, we always had people to encourage us in the 70s. You never felt like you were less than, and you never felt like you couldn't do, because they always reminded you that you're way better than you even know. So that was always good to hear as a young child. Yeah. And Miss Martin was in a presence. She was more than just a principal. She was a presence, and everybody already knew. Don't mess around, but she loved you at the same time. And one thing I learned leaving Ithaca is that you don't always get that personal attention that we got here with this small town, and even in the housing projects. I go by the housing projects, I'm like, these are palaces compared to Philadelphia, New York, and Baltimore, the places I've lived. So I'm not in New York City, but if you really look at housing, and that says something about the community too, that they feel like they deserve that. When so many cities you go to, you don't have that. But a couple people that weren't mentioned, I want to give honor to my parents, who were the absolute most influential in my life. Arthur Watkins and Doris Watkins, who moved here. She was a Southerner. She moved here to go to school and met my dad. So I put them top on the list, and I want to speak my grandmother's name, Pearl Green. And she was a presence in my life in unconditional love. I thank God that and I'll tell you what, the way the world is today, I thank God that I know what unconditional love is before I step out of my door. Because if you don't, God help you. So I'm so grateful for that. And for, you know, Dodo's family and Devorah's family and Nancy's. I still talk to Nancy's mother, who's what, 86 years old, who I adore. I literally adore her. Peaches Bell, speak her name. She's still alive, and God bless her. Still positive. That we grew up on North Albany Street, and these were our neighbors, Val, Dodo, Nancy's family. And like they said, like everybody has said, any and everybody could call you on your mess. And my mother did not play. Anybody who knows her knows she did not play. Nobody in this room's parents could come to her and tell her we did anything, because they got the benefit of the doubt, not us. But that's why we are where we are today. You know, respect wasn't even it was not a question, it was a given, you know. So for that I'm grateful. And there's somebody that's not here, lives in Atlanta now, who was really influential in not so much in the South Side, but in the community, and that was Dennis Byron. Yes. He was when we needed black male teachers and mentors, he was always there. He was always encouraging. He always was positive and had a smile on his face. He's in Atlanta now. Last I checked, it's been a minute. So those are the people in the community right over on North Albany Street
that I came to know and love. And it's always nice to come back and get the warm welcome that I get from everybody. I appreciate it. And the last thing I'll say is thank you to everybody who organized this, Devorah for the food, Katrina and Devorah and Rochelle, and who else, if I'm missing anybody, and Val, yes, Val, because it's really nice to have these things, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you guys are tenacious. And if somebody doesn't step up and say, I'll do my little part, it could be a small part, you could easily die out. This can all easily die out. So I just know, I've heard Rochelle speak on this ad nauseum for the last 9 months. Every time I talk to her, because we talk regularly, it's what's happening, and I have to hear sometimes the same thing over and over again, but I love her. I love her enough to listen. So I know that her heart, I didn't come last year, but this year I said, I gotta go and support her because her heart was she was so passionate about it. So you all are local. Keep the fire going because she lives on the West Coast. And I just thank you for your time and keep being warm and welcoming because I love that when I come back. I appreciate it. God bless you all.
So can we just close out by calling a name that we left out? Everybody just straight call a name that you left out.
And before you do that, I just want to thank everybody for being part of this today. And again, I hope that it will continue on and on. It's been a real honor to come home and to spend this time. You know, I have moved away 48 years ago. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of traveling around the world. But when I put all that together, none of it beats home. The foundation upon how I was raised, our parents, and all of the other individuals that were spoken of today that were influential in all of our lives and helped create us to be who we are today. And I hope that this legacy continues on because Ithaca is a very, very special place, and there are going to be some amazing leaders that will come out of this community. So let's keep an eye on them, let's keep encouraging them, and as Deborah said, let's go around the room and shout out the name of somebody that might have not have been mentioned so that they will never also be forgotten. Apple.
Just one. Come on. Aunt Mildred.
Mildred Hubbard. Okay.
Yes.
Kirby Edmond.
All right.
What about my dad?
You say.
I'm gonna say my
Man,
dad.
All right,
My
let's
dad,
keep it
Curtis-
going. Let's keep it going.
Curtis Milton Jr. That's my dad.
All right, Valerie.
And mine would be the Reverend Cunningham.
All right, Valerie. Katrina.
Katie Briggs and Mozelle Kinsey.
Okay, and Nancy Bell.
Elma Duchess Fishburne.
Okay, and Arthur.
Pearl Green.
Okay, and Annie.
What?
Just the name that you want to throw out there in remembrance of
Oh,
yesterday.
Ethel Hopkins.
Ethel Hopkins. Okay, and Lulu. Who comes to mind to you?
Oh, Ethel Johnson.
Okay. And in the back row, Crystal.
Marie Michael.
Okay.
Ardella Haygood.
Oh, yes.
Yes. That was history.
And David Brown.
Jimmy Yu.
All right. And Kelly.
William Gaither Pay.
All right. My father-in-law, her grandpa. I want to thank you all for coming
Lonnie
today.
Johnson.
All right.
Christine Carey.
All right. All right. All right.
What do you have?
And to never be forgotten. My parents as well, Beverly J. Martin, I tell you, I remember because she was my principal too. I remember standing in line going somewhere and having her politely, gently pull me out of the line while she was talking and plait my braids that were sticking here and there and everywhere and put me right back in line, and on my way I went. I shall never ever forget her and all the other people that have come before us. Don't you ever forget them either. Keep the legacy going. God bless.
What about you, Jacob? Got anybody?
And I want to thank